and good morning, Best of Three fam. Welcome back to another episode of the Best of Three podcast. I'm Alvin, and it is another great morning. I'm here with Tori Hawkins. Tori, how are we feeling today?
Feeling great, Alvin. Happy to be here. Good to be with you, and happy to be 6 feet up versus 6 feet down. You know what I mean?
I hear you. It's a rainy start to the week here in Atlanta, and I know you're primarily on court. What does one do? How do you manage your time these days in this part of your career when we get the rain out days?
That was a great question. Catch up on a lot of work. Being a director this is more the not so fun part of the job. Catch up on the administrative things, emails, trying to get ahead on building payroll and media. A lot of various companies now, as I'm sure yours is, they are doing a lot. They're all wrapped around this 40X principles, and we have a wig tracker that I have to do once a week. And while I'm all about these wildly, imaginable goals or whatever they want to call them, I am all about still trying to figure out or master my craft. And I think I probably watch an hour or so of videos on drills, on new things that some coaches are on the edge of doing, just to kind of spruce up my own things quite a little bit. I've been doing it for a long time, but love to stay ahead of the game. And to me, I get as much out of watching various things and various coaching tips from other coaches as anything, more even to see, is that tip solving the problem that they are saying it does? Maybe even just to see, is that coach explaining it in a certain way that I like? And some cases, that drill's terrible. Feeling's not very good, and so on. But either way, it gives me good content to kind of go off of. So I would probably say after all the administrative things are done, watching some tennis, catching up on some videos, really just kind of, it's funny. As you know, when we talk about various content and having a various agenda that we're going to speak on, a lot of it we're tapping back on, on months, years of previous watched tennis or content that we've stored, in a sense,
Yeah, for
in the
sure.
brain for a long time. And so that comes from days like this, a lot of days, I look at a coach in a sense like a bank, a lot goes
Yeah.
out, right? Is the coach putting enough resources back in? And a lot of coaches get to a certain point, they feel like they have enough reserves. They're constantly spitting out, and they're not always taking back in. And I've always tried to watch a good bit, always try to be a student of the game. And in my opinion, the better the coach, the better the student of the game he is or she is. And that's kind of where I'm at with it. So it's a good day to, catch my reserves back up, so to speak.
Yeah, I like that. And I think it's also very interesting in that, I've been playing tennis for 35 years at this point, and started my own coaching career I don't know, midway through college, and then coached, on for about 10 years after that. So I've also seen some things and have hit enough balls and have fed enough balls to, you think a lot of things, but then now on this side where I don't coach anymore, and I just play as a recreational adult player these days.
Sounds painful, doesn't it?
It is what it is. And I have young children. My kids are 7 and 5. So hopefully I've started to get out there with them a little bit more and more. So maybe that coaching starts to come back. And as a parent coach, potentially, or just as a parent of a player, there's another evolution left. But I say that because even last week, I hit a couple times last week indoors. And it's funny how the coaching tip you gave in our last episode about being calm when the pace picks up is still something that I still work on. I love having access and being invited to play in indoor courts. I am not an indoor tennis player.
Yeah.
When I struggle enough with pace as it is, and then when you put me inside against someone with pace, I hit with one of your former proteges, Ian Melnick, assistant coach at Emory.
Yeah.
And I mean, he hits a good ball. He's a young guy, and those courts are fast too. So those are not good combinations for me, and that's something that I need to pay attention to myself. It's like when the pace gets up, we get to ball 4, ball 5, breathe, be calm, be like Nadal, if you will.
Right. I think, and Ian hit a good ball. Always hit a clean ball, and pretty, and a little flatter, than a lot of guys, and really penetrated the court really well.
Let me tell you about it.
Yeah, seriously. And there were guys like Eric Morgan, who you remember was a good national player back in 12 to 14, hit a really big ball as well. And you knew that windup was coming. You could almost kind of see it and time it. But different players are involved. I grew up in Kansas, so half our year was indoors. So if anything, getting used to clay
No.
was tough for me, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
clay, the extra time, the time the ball sat, didn't really slide much, didn't play on clay much. And there was probably one, maybe two facilities in town that had clay courts, which was one of the national country clubs. And so to your point, it's kind of also where we grew up. I think a lot of players on tour are very similar. You see a lot of Europeans that grew up on clay. Ironically, you see a lot of Europeans that grew up indoors, and they had big game and big shots. I think
Really depends
Medvedev
on
and
the part of
Rublev
Europe,
grew up
actually. Yeah.
100%. They grew up indoors. I mean, Rublev smacks the balls about as big as it can be smacked, and that only came from indoor tennis. You know what I mean? You couldn't be doing that on the clay. So it's one of those things where you can even see things like that. Clearly, Nadal grew up on clay. Clearly, I mean, he slides well. This ball has a lot of action on it, and he just slides like he's on ice skates. So it's one of those things where it's to your point. You got to get to a point where you're not only you calm, but your heart rate is almost above resting. Only then can you truly feel and be in the point and make decisions at that speed. I always say it, and one day I'm going to write a book on it. I want you to hold me to it. The book is entitled "It's All About Time." And so the whole concept of the whole thing is time is your biggest factor to consider in everything, both your hitting of the actual ball, the time you have in the point, time in between the games to kind of really assess, what just happened. It's too fast. It's too fast. You're not a race car driver, contemplating a move. You're a race car driver at 140, 160, 180 miles an hour. You're seeing, you have no time to think. And so when you're managing the many emergencies like that at that speed and that pace, and you're managing the last ball's lack of target with the next ball's, emergency situation, and now means an open stance, you might even get back ahead with the next open stance backhand, only to kind of get back where you were, and then get a little excited, get a little greedy, and then try to one up yourself instead of just staying calm and saying, okay, that's where I need it. And that's where the whole beauty of tennis lies, is in those 3 to 5 seconds of absolute adrenaline rush. Feel like Matrix with the little,
Yep. Yep.
plug in the back of my head, and also, okay, man, it's a lot, and every good rally, man, gives you a bit of a jolt, and if it doesn't, you're not a good tennis player, because that's what it's all about,
I hear
The
you. I
winning,
hear.
the winning
Well,
takes care of itself, but that's those moments, and hopefully you have a match with about 30, 35 to 40 of them, and that's what you call a quality match.
yeah, and for the people out there listening, if you think Coach Troy Hawkins should be writing a book, and how much would you pay for it for a little pre-release? Leave that in the
There you
comments for
go.
us. And
There
I
you
think
go.
I think that's a really good place to kind of segue into what we wanted to talk about today. We wanted to do a quick look back over the year on the ATP side, less so about results and specific players, but more so about like what we could take away from what we saw this year, and then how that might impact what we see next year as the game kind of transitions into this next generation. But I do realize that last time we got together, we talked about the end of an era with both Nadal and Murray leaving the sport this year. I did want to make sure we left some space for one European we didn't mention, who Mr. Dominic Thiem, who also hung it up this year, and obviously not a part of the big three or big four, but I think his place in tennis history, he's almost, I look at him as our tennis version of Penny Hardaway, right? It's a lot of the potential was there. You saw it when it was great, and you could see it coming, but then derailed by injuries, right? So
Sure.
I mean, between
Sure.
2017 and 2020, like he was right there. He was right there.
Right.
Final 3 or 4 Grand Slams, ended up picking up one. You'd be shocked. I kind of jotted these notes down, but his record against the big three, like 6-10 lifetime against Nadal, it did, and a couple of those wins were on clay.
Sure.
5-7
Sure.
against Joker, he was right there. Sneaky 5-2 against Fed lifetime,
Yeah.
like, and then a handy 8-4 against Zverev, and
Yeah.
because of the
Yeah.
timing, he never really got a chance to truly at his prime battle against
Yeah.
Sinner and Carlos. But I think I know you probably have some different opinions about it, but I feel like he did win one right now. I feel like if he didn't get hurt on the back end of 2020 to kind of like put more or
Right.
less put an end to his career,
Right.
what would his 2021 through 2024 look like, because he's not an old guy, right? He's
right. And let's
he's right
face
there.
it, you make a great point about his head to head against that era and against those GOATs. You mentioned Penny Hardaway. I would even say it more like a Derrick Rose, who
Mm,
there were gaps in his playing, right? Penny played hurt, was dinged up, missed chunks of the year. Derrick Rose was out, for
right.
large chunks of his career with some season-ending injuries. And that's what I felt about Team. It felt like he never really came back after
No,
the
no,
first
yeah,
big
yeah,
injury. And I feel like Derrick Rose, and then when he got back, he was let's face it, good, but a shell of himself from movement-wise.
absolutely.
I get your point about what woulda, coulda, shoulda. I really like, first of all, and I love Dominic Team. I mean, in an era when all the guys coming out had two-handers and were tall and, 6'4" prototypes, and let's face it, Zverev was almost a prototype of himself. Now we have a guy, one-hander. I mean, brought out the white bab, the strike. It was almost his namesake. I mean, and had a pretty one-hander too, I might add. I mean, the guy moved around the court gracefully. Was really, if you think about it, was a more athletic Fed with a better backhand. And so you kind of saw the one-hander in me keep seeing this progression of one, he's getting better and
Yeah,
getting more,
yeah.
I'm going to say more polished, where the backhands are becoming more and more weapons as opposed to just shots to hit to when he went for a forehand. And he had a big forehand, you know what I mean? So there was so many good
Oh
things
yeah,
about
hit
his
that thing like
game.
a howitzer.
When he beats Zverev that year in the Open, I remember telling myself, Zverev's messed up. He's let a guy come in from behind him and skip the line. And if he's not careful, that may have been his one, that may have been his legitimate shot at winning one. And so I say that to say, I agree with you in that he could have gone more. Of course, Pandy happened, so we don't know what would have happened after that. But I will say this. I will take exception to the Fed lifetime, because Fed, let's face it, was in the twilight of his career. I will say Fabrice Santoro had a winning record, against,
Yeah, yeah.
against Fed too. And that's not to say, I don't think Fabrice ever got inside the top 10. Now, that's not to say Fabrice wasn't a good player, but Fabrice was just matched up very terrible to certain players. When you got a guy with a two-handed slice, I mean,
Right, yeah.
who doesn't match up forward to you? So I say it to say, and I don't do anything to knock Dominic. I think it was a phenomenal player, and the world is the worse for him and his unfortunate timing and some injuries. But I don't know if he would have won more than two, in my opinion. And that's not to say that that's not an accomplishment. It's not to say that that's not taken away from his legacy. I just think the timing from in which he did it. You look at the other players that have since, as I called yesterday, filled the vacuum. He would have been now part of a new rivalry. I submit to you, who would that rivalry have been? And one could arguably say Zverev. And in some ways, maybe Zverev is the loser for not having that matchup, not having that person to push him to get that revenge match against, and establishing a rivalry. And of course, then we're looking at a budding rivalry with Alcaraz and center, and perhaps that could have been, to your words, the bridge. Maybe that Zverev team matchup could have been something, and that's
Yeah,
something that if that would have happened, now you can talk three, maybe four, because the two of those two going back and forth.
right. And that's that's a really good segue into what we were actually going to talk about today. And you and I spoke about this offline, and we kind of had to stop ourselves because I know we wanted to really unpack this conversation about, so there's a lot of people who have won one, right? But they always say the first one's the hardest one to win. And as we're shifting generations, we were talking about some players who you feel like just aren't gonna get it done. And you just mentioned Zverev, and I think that's probably the difference between what I like to think would have happened with Dominique after he won that first, right? Because he went to 3 or 4 finals, finally got over the hump, albeit an ugly one at that 2020 Open where he and Zverev were dinosaur hands about trying to take
Yeah,
the thing, but he
yeah,
won it,
yeah.
right? And
You
so I
take it. No,
feel
you
like,
take it. No, you
yeah,
take
yeah,
it.
yeah. And
Yeah,
I feel like the winner of that one then kind of breaks the seal and is able
yeah.
to, next time they get in that moment, they're able to seize it. They're calmer. They're able to breathe, right? So with that, but it wasn't Zverev, right? And I think I think maybe even winning that one might have been wasted on Dominique because he was pretty much done after that from an injury standpoint. So as we look at players, in 2025 that, let's say, performed well, and we look for them to continue to do well next year, you gave me a list of players that you think are more or less their window has closed as far as trying to make a run at Grand Slams. And you gave me you started with Zverev, and you already mentioned Rublev, but we've also got Tsitsipas and Dimitrov, who's a little bit older, and then like the Hubie Hurkaczes of the world. Why do you feel, because I feel a little bit differently about a couple of them, but why do you feel that those, let's say, Zverev, Rublev, Tsitsipas, even Medvedev, who has one, are actually done?
A great question.
Done in your words. Done.
Done in my words. Clearly don't take that to the bank. However, I will say this. I had a long conversation with one of the Nike execs years ago when one of my players was on the tour. And interesting, by the way, and this will help you and maybe some of the viewers to understand, most of the time when a tennis player, it may be other sports too, but I know for tennis players, you hear this contract reportedly worth X amount of dollars, right? Let's just say it's $1 million for a 5-year deal. What that really is $200,000 for 5 years. And there are reductions in, that come out at the end of it. And there's also bonuses that are laced with it. So what happens is in year one, let's just say, Wusu we project, is going to reach top 200. Okay. That's your first benchmark. Alvin makes 120 in the world. He's doing great. He's on a rocket. I mean, he's doing phenomenal, right? He kept to his contract. He's got bonuses. He's got endorsement deals. He's starting to really move this ticker. Year two, the player needs to be top 200. Okay, great. Alvin is now 88. He is moving.
Wait, year one, top 200. Year two, top 100. Is that what we're saying? Okay, all right.
You keep the same format going from 200 to 100 to 50. Okay. Now you get inside top 20. Now you get inside top 10. And of course, 5 and 1, depending on how aggressive your agent and you feel that you're going to be. Now, there's your 5-year deal. The reason they said that was every deal needs to be garnered to reach number 1. He tells me, and I thought it was a pretty big deal when he said it. He says the majority of players, over 90%, never reach year 3 or 4's incentive. And he got me thinking. Most players that win Grand Slams do so within 3 years.
Yeah.
Certainly within 4.
Yeah.
So here's where this whole conversation came from. Trying to be the contrarian that I can be at times. I said, that can't be right. I'm going to go back and do some research. Alvin, to a player, no one reached it outside of 4 years. I think Fed was one of the latest at 4 years. I think he turned pro in 98. I think 2002, I think is when he had a nice breakout. I want to say he won Wembley in 03. Beat Pete, I think in the 02, in the 2002 Wembley, right? So I say that to say, and the guy's a Nike exec higher up. He's seen his fair share of contracts.
This sounds like a Mike Nakajima type of conversation. But
well, that's where we were, right?
Okay,
and so Mike broke this down to me in notes and basic terms, right? By the way, we ended up going with Reebok, right? So just to help you understand, it was an ironic because at that point in time, they were looking, and even for all the players, they're looking for that player that they can get to that level. And I could give you a host of players that had signed and didn't sign, or that signed and didn't quite make that mark. And it's not to say that they're not good tennis players. They're all really good tennis players. The tour, the top 100, is a collection of 100 of the best sticks in the world right now. They're all phenomenal. I don't think
there aren't better players. They'd be there if they were.
Period. And I think sometimes the average person doesn't understand top 100 in the world is probably 7 or 8 levels better than the best player you've ever been across the net from. I mean, this guy he's so far past the guy that beat the brakes off you, 0-0. I mean, and we're talking even guys that played good level college ball like ourselves. They are just that much better. And as you get better and better in college, well, then that guy's only 3 levels better than you, but he's still 3 levels better than you. And I say that to say, and now you talk about top 50? Top 10? Come on. And so anyway, I say that to say I don't like dinging players. And certainly I want to come at this very humble to say, when I say a player doesn't have a shot to win a Grand Slam, I think he's done. It's not to say he doesn't have the game. He doesn't have the goods. This guy is phenomenal. I just think his window has closed. And here's the term I use, and a lot of players talk about it when other coaches talk about it. There's blood in the water.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know you can be beaten. They know you can be beaten. And the sharks, so to speak, who can smell that blood from a mile away, they know you can be beaten. And on that day, so on that day, you're vulnerable. Winning produces no blood in the water. And the quicker a guy does it, here's an interesting little side note that I want to add to that, the rocket to number one within 3 to 4 years. It's okay to lose to you.
Right.
Alvin Owusu's on a 21-match streak. He's playing me. Hadn't played me before. I'm 5 in the world. Alvin comes in playing, and what do I say? He's playing well right now.
Playing well right now. Yeah.
Now, what does that mean? He's playing well right now means it's okay to lose to him. He's hot right now. Hey, everybody's losing this guy. Man, look at that. Lefty serve. Wow,
it's not about me. It's about him.
Not about me.
I'm still good. Guy, it's about him.
I'm still good. And I will be good at this match. But you know what? Someone's playing really well right now. Always playing with his face. And nice play, buddy. And I tip my hat to him. And then next year, they'll assemble the team to try to find a way to try to beat the guy. Now, is some of this skewed with our last batch of GOATs? Well, one could say that. But you even look back at some of the previous Grand Slam winners, and all of them did the exact same thing. They got there within 3 to 5 years. So there's where that 5 years comes from, and very, very few. I think Gorn, even Mitch did it many years after his prime. Guys like Pat Raftery, who did it back-to-back, did it years. I think Pat was 2 or 3 weeks from quitting tennis before he came out, and one of the guys who played him told me he went out and got hammered the night before because he was about to be done with tennis and just happened to win a match and came through. There are those, and I think even at the time, I think Patrick's, to his chagrin, I think he surprised himself with such a kind of a late surge late in his career. And there's always a few others, but they're, for the most part, the ones that have won and done so fairly early. They've won and they've won quickly, and they have assumed the top. Really, you have to say it. And those that didn't, never did.
Right. And so when you know, it's always wise to follow the money, right? And if the money, like the Nikes and Adidas of the world, are the ones that are funding some of these players to a certain extent while they're getting started on tour, it's almost like, you know, not to get political, but it's almost like a campaign, right? Like if a candidate is not, if people don't think a candidate's going to win, they don't end up investing in that candidate. It's like, it's, correct. You know, and you need money to win, obviously, but so you do have to follow the money. And I think that's really interesting because I was thinking earlier before we started recording, like, you know, no one really comes out of nowhere especially on the men's side. And, you know, in our next episode, we will talk completely about the women's side, but on the men's side, no one ever really comes out of nowhere to win a slam. Not all the way, right? These are long tournaments, rarely. Long matches. Yep. And I think Medvedev is an interesting case because it took him a little while. Like he hit the scene within that 3 years that you're talking about. He was hitting his progressive marks 100 or 200, 150 by year 3 when he did the whole thing at the U.S. Open and ended up finally losing to Nadal. But let us not forget, while he seemed random at that time, he almost won that match. He was up 2 sets to love.
Yep.
He's the same age as Rublev and these guys, and he was seeded.
Best friends with Rublev.
Yeah, and then proceeds to final the Australian Open either the next year and loses Djokovic, something like that. But he's a little older now, so you would say, okay, he's probably not going to make it. And he did win one, but that one was a little odd, right? The 2020 U.S. Open was 2021 U.S. Open. Yeah, that was the one he won when Djokovic was going for the calendar Grand Slam. Ends up going, this is a little inside baseball, goes a little too long with Zverev in the semi, 5 sets over almost 5 hours. And then Djokovic comes out dead legs, loses like 4-4 and 4 to
they played his worst match.
He had nothing. He
he
couldn't.
played in years and
He couldn't. He
looked
had nothing.
human for once or twice in his career.
But the point about Nike willing to make an investment for 5 years and expecting players to hit these benchmarks at, almost halving their ranking every year makes you start to see players, especially this time of year, right? You see them wearing one thing in New York at the Australian Open, at the US Open in August, and then they pop up wearing something different in Australia. And it happens. People change coaches, change rackets, change sponsors, uniform sponsors. That makes sense because someone like a Rublev, who was a Nike athlete for years, up until about a year and a half ago, maybe, if I can remember if it was this year or last year, he never made top 5 in year 4. He hit all the other marks and has been perennial 6 through 10, 7 through 12 for the last 3 years. And now that you say it to me, it makes so much sense. It's that Nike deal that is no longer lucrative for either side.
You're with product only,
go,
no longer endorsed.
Right.
You're sponsored, not endorsed, and it's a whole different set of circumstances with a few less zeros. That's where the 5-year thing came from. And so I expanded it out to the 5 years, as the Nike executive told me. But at the end of the day, that's really what it comes down to. So with that said, start looking at some of the players that first came on the scene. Look at how long it took them to get to the final / I will say win a Grand Slam.
No, you're right on. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's where we're at. Now, let me also say this again, completely humble. And there have been some of the best players that I've seen strike a tennis ball that have not won a Grand Slam. And I thought at any given time, this player was ready for a breakout. One of my favorite players to watch him strike a tennis ball was Thomas Berdych, who I think was some of the best looking game. Thomas, I think he made, I don't know how many semis he made in the Grand Slams. That one, I forget those years. I want to say mid-2010s when he was, or late 2010s. He was arguably one of the best ball strikers, most complete game that was out there. I go back to my previous, I'm going to call him a personal GOAT, Marat Safin. Did not have a bad stroke. There was no weakness. If there was a weakness, it was a little bit going on outside the 2 years. But nobody wanted to play Marat Safin. Nobody. I had the pleasure of watching this guy hit some balls. And Alba, when I tell you, his warm-up is something that I aspire to get to in my game. I mean, his warm-up was just like, and then he missed a ball down the line that was about as clean as you could hit, and he missed it by like 6 inches, and then breaks one racket, goes to his bag, rips out the plastic, breaks 2 more, breaks rackets. He hadn't even struck balls right there, and then comes back, takes out the 4th one, and gets back to rally. And I'm like, I'm proud of you. Stay focused.
Well, that's a really good. Marat's a good example of how much it takes to not only get to the top, but then maintain that level of dominance over a stretch of more than 2 seasons, right? Because he did.
Right.
We all knew he was a great player. We all could see it. The players could see it. And then he finally decided to get serious about it and then did win the Australian Open. And I don't remember what year it was, but that's kind of big.
Oh,
it was like
was
2009, 8,
maybe?
So it was that far back. Yeah.
I think it was that far back. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, that's a good place to kind of take a look at what we've got this year and this past season. It seems like we're starting to settle into what the top looks like, right? So this season on the men's side, Jannik Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz split the 2 Grand Slams. Obviously, our main man Novak did pull down the gold medal in the Olympics, which he was eyeing for, and he was right there at the Australian Open. Obviously, got hurt at the French, final Wimbledon, so he's not going anywhere without a fight. But his schedule is going to be limited from here on out. So
you'll have to take it from him. He's not going to give it to you.
Exactly.
But,
so with these two, Sinner and Alcaraz seemingly kind of pulling away from the pack, I feel like, well, one, my question is, do you think that changes any next year? And we can be as specific as what do you think happens in the Grand Slams next year, to all the way to back to our previous conversation about people being done. I feel like because tennis is on the men's side is homogenizing so much, and that we are in a space where we're transitioning eras, and I think there's going to be a little more parity in that top 5.
Yep.
I feel like this is going to pay me to say I do feel like Alexander Zverev there's going to be an opportunity for him to fall into a Grand Slam because these guys aren't as bulletproof at the slams as they used to be. Alcaraz mess around and lose in the second round of the U.S. Open to a Bodek van der Sloot, right? Why?
Yep.
Roger would never. Rafa would never, right?
Sure.
But Alcaraz could. Yeah, until he proves
100%.
otherwise. So yeah, I'll lay out there. But what do you see up there at the top of the men's game? Kind of what are your expectations moving forward in 2025?
I'm gonna put a huge caveat at the beginning, and that is what the ATP will do to Jannik Sinner and these.
Yeah. Oh, you have to.
So,
yeah.
So we have to put that at the very top. One would argue that has helped him with his current two. Right. That's but let's just keep that part in mind.
Oh,
right?
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Just I got to put it out there because, and it's not to say that others aren't juicing. It's not to say that, they always say it's the caught and the uncaught. But it's not to say that all aren't doing some version of it. What I will say is that before we say anything else, that has to be taken into consideration because should they ban him / slap a fine, a charge, out of tennis for a year, that changes everything. And now
or even out for a month, out for 3 months. So just to kind of put a slight I guess info here that Jannik Sinner did test positive since I guess after Cincinnati. It came out right before the U.S. Open.
Right.
He was exonerated of wrong. Yeah, he was exonerated of wrongdoing by I think the ITA or whatever governing body that runs doping essentially for the ATP. But another association, WADA, said that they didn't really agree with that ruling, and they're suggesting that he should be suspended for a longer period of time. So we will find out. I think that happens right after the U.S. Open, maybe February 1st or something like that. So
we've had numerous situations like this before, and I will tell you that has proven to be a bit of a cloud over some players' heads, and it's been a very tough issue. I'll give you two players specifically. You recall Richard Gasquet had his issue with the alleged substance and the French kiss with the young lady that I assumed that had all the cocaine that he had none, but somehow she and I made him test positive. But put a drain on Gasquet's career. It put I remember Guillermo Cañas in the mid 2000s. Was a very good tennis player. Had a breakout years in the French. Was playing some good ball. Had got caught not once but twice, and so now they were putting the cuffs on him. He was banned for a year, and sure enough, rumor has it, that they went right back to the old training grind and didn't change anything. If anything, put a few more ounces in that mixture, and I'll be ready to go next year, and I'll be ready for clay court season. And so there's this whole, back in those days, the Argentinians were really pushing the envelope with a lot of things as far as enhancers and whatnot. I say it to say it takes away a player's ability to stay consistent for the whole year. It takes away the ability for a player to get grooved. That blood in the water could just be you're not as sharp and as razor sharp as you were, and you're not bulletproof as we once saw you. And now you have these other things coming on that it's just kind of tough to play. We even had our own local. Remember a kid we had back then, Wayne Odesny, who had some doping allegations, and players were almost protesting playing him because it was just so blatant, some of the things he's doing. And you heard it right here, Wayne Odesny doesn't even belong in the same conversation. As good as Wayne was as a junior and a top 100 tennis player, Wayne was not in the level of these guys we're talking about. So I said to say it's going to be a huge issue for Jannik, and I really, Jannik, I have I'm saying his name, but I really, and again, he was a former skier and a world champion when he was younger on the slopes. So this guy knows top level competition. This guy's been around the top level athletes, and who knows, the jury's out, but unfortunately in the court of public opinion, he has an alleged violation and it's his burden to prove otherwise. So with that said, assuming he stays and assuming, obviously Carlos as well, those two, in my opinion, will have a nice rivalry for the next 18 months to 2 years. I think it's theirs to win. It's only a matter of who gets Novak on their half of the draw first, and who is playing on the other half to try to play spoiler. Injuries and everything else notwithstanding, I think those two win 4 of the next 6, 5 of the next 8, in my opinion. With Jannik out, I think it's 100% crapshoot. I think Carlos could easily win 3 of the next 5, 4 of the next 8 easily. Not easily, never easy, but clear-cut favorite. His game matched up on a lot of surfaces. His speed helps him in Australia. His drop shots and feel and good returns help him on grass. He's, of course, in great shape, and he's from Spain. So, and he's got J.C. Ferrero as his coach. He will be disciplined on the French, and this may be an era where the French starts to have some parity in as well. And the U.S. Open, of course, he's already shown that he can win on the hard court. So there's not a service he doesn't like. So that's why I'm saying he's a favorite for those. And then getting to the list we mentioned, some of the others, I just feel the window has closed.
Yeah.
Alex, Sasha Zverev is one. I feel like Rublev, his Mehdi's compatriot and childhood friend and rival growing up. Unfortunately, I don't see it in the cards for him. Could he play spoiler at one tournament and just the stars, the moon, and the sun align? He's that Goran Ivanisevic of today that could just absolutely play lights out for 2 weeks and just and no. And I mean, could take that out.
The Goran comparison, though, I think is a little unfair because while Rublev, maybe on paper, his ranking says he is a perennial top 10 player, right? So that on paper that screams contending at slams, but I think he's only semifinaled one slam in his life, whereas Goran was there in finals on the doorstep, top 5 player, every once in a while before I think he won his one Wimbledon where naturally he was about to retire. He got a wild card that year. The circumstances were a little strange around him winning that particular Wimbledon, but he had been in position before to do it. So a little bit different there.
The reason I'm saying difference is Rublev was doing it against some of the GOATs. And when you have the GOATs there, right? Yeah. You just have to appreciate that's a round shy, maybe 2, depending on when you ran into one of those guys that you were going to run into those. We talked last time about a guy who I think was one of the best American players in the last 20 years, and Andy Roddick. Andy Roddick should have won at least 4 slams at the level of tennis he was, but he happened to be born at the wrong time.
Right, yeah.
That match, I want to say it was 2009. Was it the 2009 Open? I mean, was probably one of the, when he played Fed, the night match, was probably one of the best tennis matches I had seen. It was at 2009 or 10, I can't remember. But it was phenomenal tennis. Fed just wasn't going to be beaten that night, period. 5 setters. I mean, you could not have had better shot making and bigger, more explosive shots. So you're going from 2003 when Andy won it to that 7-year run. Andy was still competitive.
Yeah, he was right there. He was right
there. So I say that to say, how many would Andy have won had the mighty Fed not been playing at that time? And
it doesn't even feel like Andy won only one major. Like you look at Andy's career and you look at Medvedev's career, right? On paper, they're probably about the same, but it feels like, I don't know, it just feels like Andy was like number 1 for a while.
You would think
but
that.
It just like it was a flash.
But it was a flash, man.
But he was also 2, 3 for a while. Like he was there until...
To my point, this is what we're getting into. And now you come into the end of Nadal. Fed's already left at this point, unfortunately, but for all intents and purposes, now you got Novak and Nadal, and you've got Carlos and Jannik, who are now coming in. I think Jannik in the last, let's face it, 2 years, as Nadal is decrescendoed, he's crescendoed, so he's filling that vacuum, I call it. But this is what I'm getting at. Now you're looking at the rest. Now, the Medvedevs who have spanned that time, the Rublevs, the Zverevs, they have spanned this time frame and have not filled in their own vacuum. The 5-year, we're going to call the 5-year rule a theory, what we're going to say, but I'm going to call the 5-year rule, that has not boded well for them. And I say that to say, if not now, then when? And if not by now, why not? And what had they changed so drastically? I don't see anything. And what is their hunger level there to really help them want to get there? I say no. And because they've done it already. And it's not to say they're not good tennis players. It's not to say they can't play spoiler. But I just don't see it in the cards for them winning a slam at this point in time. The one other player you mentioned, I think is unfortunately has peaked, is the guy by the name is Stefanos. And I just don't see him getting back to that semi or final slam. And I love the kid's game. I mean, one of the most athletic guy that's 6'3", almost 6'4" you've ever seen. I mean, the kid can hit an inside out from outside the alley, inside in. I mean, can slap it with the best of them. I mean, just there's not a shot he can't hit. But unfortunately, he's seen the lost a bit of his form, lost some confidence, his blood in the water.
I think he's your poster child for blood in the water because he
there it is.
Yeah, he's hit that. I'm
Chris
going to be
Eubanks
6'2".
beat him at Wembley. And Chris, and I love Chris. I used to have some lessons with Chris when he was younger. Chris is a great kid and an unbelievable player. Georgia Tech's own, right? Atlanta's own. Love Chris. When I saw Chris, I was telling players and going in the match, I said, you know what? If there's any top seed to play, you like him playing Tsitsipas because there's just a chance that Tsitsipas will not will succumb to the moment of a young upstart playing well and just get a little under his skin. I said he's just not confident in that matchup. And I said, and we all know the rest. That was his banner, Chris's banner year. So here we go. Now, what's the chances of Stefanos getting back into the top three? I think very rare. Does that say he's gone away? No, kid's a phenomenal tennis player. He's everybody's bad day. But I don't see him being a threat to win a Grand Slam from this point going forward. And you can keep going. To me, Dimitrov was your team, in my opinion, before team. Unfortunately, with some injuries, and I think Grigor was a great player. Arguably, I would say a better Fed himself, better one-hander. Not as graceful,
A little herky-jerky on the serve.
A little herky-jerky and a little more Sylvester Stallone herky to Fed's gracefulness. And Fed was bridging the con. But I say it to say he also had some injuries that beset him early in his career and didn't really have a chance to really go as deep as he'd like to in some of the rounds. Proved himself every bit of it for his quality play this last couple of years. But I think Father Time is catching up. And as we all know, Father Time is undefeated. So I feel like his days in that window is certainly closed. And unfortunate for him with some injuries, made a valiant comeback to make us all believe that he still had the goods, even 10, 12 years past his prime from when he was first doing it. And he's another player that you thought could have for those one or two in between in that Fed Nadal early GOAT era. And everybody else you're talking about, to me, as good of players as they are, they don't even belong in top 5 contender for a slam conversation. They are good players on any given day. They'll win a 500. They'll beat one of these players on some rando tournament, but they're not contenders. They don't believe they can get to the semi or final.
To reference the Matrix for the second time today, do you remember the character, the Keymaker?
I do. A
lot of these guys, everyone has a little Keymaker in them, and the Keymaker, his objective in the Matrix was to help Neo get to the place he needed to get to. He had the keys to the doors, to certain doors, right? Well, in this instance, we'll call them a top 50 door, a top 20 door, a top 10 door. But at some point he gets to a door and he's like, I can't go through this door with you. You have to go. And this is where I stop. And I say that because I think it's okay. There have to be these side characters in every story. And the story of, and we'll move on from this, the story of 2024 moving into 2025 is not about the Rublevs and the Zverevs. I'm sorry. They are the players that set the stage for what I think can be generational players in Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner to actually perform on those stages where these other gentlemen they're just not supposed to be there, and that's okay.
100%. Exit stage left, and they've had a wonderful career. We've enjoyed watching them, but unfortunately that program that the Keymaker was about has expired and it's been compromised.
Yeah.
Even the Keymaker met his untimely end.
Even
right?
the Keymaker met his untimely end.
He was in exile, if memory serves. So it's one of those things where another program had him in exile. So to your point, I love the Matrix movies, all of them, and I love the reference. I would tell you that the Neos, which was a recurring program, if you will, a blip, a glitch in the Matrix, as we all, hence the term. We have seen these types before, and that player typically gets to that number one within 3 years.
Yeah.
They get the 5 year.
That's their prototype. 3. Yeah.
That's their prototype. That's the door they go through, and only they can go through. And so everybody else is unfortunately not, and it just is what it is. But with that said, I think we're seeing that couple of players with those keys. I hate to say it because at some point, sometimes those players aren't really vetted, tested, and they haven't beat the man to become the man. I will say this about Novak, and he has never been one of my favorite players, although he is, of course, the GOAT. He beat 2 GOATs on the way to becoming the GOAT. And you have to appreciate that. He's just been good. My brother and I always go back and forth on Jordan and Kobe. And the one line he continues to always come back. Kobe beat Air Jordan when Air Jordan was still Air Jordan. And his point was, at the height of his insurgency, Michael was at the top of his game. Kobe came through and basically, he deserved the number 24. He was one number better. And in the court of public opinion. Now, we all know the stats and we all know what Kobe's done. But to his point, and many of the others have not. And this is why Kobe still lives in our, may he rest in peace, still lives in our minds, our collective minds as the, street cred GOAT because of what he did at that moment. Tennis needs Jannik and Carlos right now to continue their rivalry. Unfortunately, Jannik has come on the decrescendo of Novak. Carlos has at least beaten Novak at the highest stage. And so therefore, that helps us to maintain the benchmark of the level that these GOATs have put up that's been so high. Naomi Osaka beat Serena and accepted the baton, right? How far she ran with it, that'll be another episode, and we'll come back to that. But that's how big her almost early semi-retirement shows you how big of a lifetime achievement award it was. I'm getting back to, go ahead.
No, well, I was I just remember this. This is kind of a callback to what you were talking about earlier. Randomly, I haven't heard of Guillermo Cañas in forever, but I do have very, very fond memories of him beating Fed back-to-back events, Indian Wells and Miami, something like 2007, 2008, which I was like, who is this guy? And now but the juice helps. The juice helps.
Yeah.
You mentioned Jannik Sinner. You mentioned Kobe kind of taking it from NJ. We can argue that on another episode.
Yep.
And you mentioned Carlos taking it from Novak. I think the seminal taking of the torch was probably Wimbledon 2023, right? That great five-setter. The great five-setter where he legit took it from Novak when Novak was at his full powers and he took it from him.
100%. And the follow-up, 24, where he beat him and darn near beat him in straights.
Yeah, he beat him cleanly in 2024. And Novak had just come in, he's on one leg, right? So he did great to get there. But I don't want to overlook Sinner beating Novak in Australia in 2024. He beat him in the semis. Novak did not look great. He looked a little cooked, but he did do it. Now, my question's going to be, but it wasn't one of those classic. They had a couple battles at the end of 2023, right? Where I think Sinner beat him at the ATP finals.
Right.
Turned around, lost him again in that same event, but then beat him at Davis Cup for Italy to take the Davis Cup title, right? So I think that was the I'm taking this. And then followed up with the Grand Slam right after, right? And then 8 months later did it again. So I want to give Jannik his due credit, and he did slay the king,
slay the dragon. Sure,
he did.
And I will give him that. I would also tell you that, and unfortunate until it's proved otherwise, was the juice part of his recipe?
Hey, we're gonna see.
We're gonna find that out. However, touche on that with Jannik, and you heard it right here. That Australia, both Australias for that matter, I thought his turnaround time was otherworldly. I mean, the things he was doing, as fresh as he looked, wow. I mean, I tell you what, heaven help the world of the rest of us if he ain't juicing, because that brother's his condition's on a whole nother level. I mean, he's able to do, which we saw Novak do. You know what I mean? It's some back-to-back matches in Australia at overtime. 4-hour, 5-hour matches, absolute gladiator style. Came back the next day, fresh, ready to go. Hey, I'll go another 5. Let's go. And so to me, that's puts those players at that high level. So I just feel like no other player to date has done the same thing. No other player to date, in my humble opinion as a spectator, believes they can do the same thing. And if you don't believe it, if you don't truly believe that you're that good and believe that you have the pedigree to go that far, you're almost better off being a younger player who thinks they has a shot to get there with almost ignorance to what they know and don't know than an experienced player who has done it. It's the David and Goliath, you know what I mean, situation. David was visiting his brothers in battle before he slayed Goliath. He was too young for battle. You know what I mean? It's a little Bible segue there. But he wasn't there. Part of the brothers and everybody else was too afraid to face this guy. They knew how big he was,
right?
And had seen their friends get cut up and chopped up by this guy. So here's my man coming through. We won't get too theological, but the point of the matter is, David did not know enough, and some would say knew just enough, to battle said person. And that to me enters your segue to some of the new upcomers that actually have a true chance because they don't know what they don't know, and they don't have that blood in the water yet.
Yeah, we've had some players kind of pop up this year who've had notable results. I'll say notable, and have made some climbs in the rankings. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on you've got a small list of players here, like your Jack Drapers and your Arthur Feasts and your Lorenzo Mussettis. We've talked about GMP out of France, and then one of my personal favorites, Jerry Shang. Junction Chain, watching that kid play tennis, man. A lefty out of my out of the school of the long lineage of lefties throwing around a Babolat. But of these players, these groups of players here, do you think there are any that have a chance, who have the game and also the the fresh perspective to make a run at these guys, to move past to overlook the Zverevs and Rublevs of the world and go right after the Alcarazes and Sinners?
I think each of them are first, second, third round scares for each of these guys. I'm going to skip down to GMP just because I feel like his serve is such a difference maker that if the sun, moon, and stars are aligned, he can, by sheer force of serve, assert his dominance on a player. The other players, right? We know Draper. We know his game revolves a lot around his forehand and in his transition game. Other players don't match up well to him, but unfortunately, these two match up very well. They have great returns. They have great passing shots. They have great depth on both sides. I'm sorry, he may not be as big. Mussetti's a little bit mercurial. He has his good days and his bad. When he's hot, he can play very well. When he's not, he can be routine. As I say, GMP, and again, not a bad backcourt game. To me, the serve is, he is a cross, in my opinion, between your Isner and your Evo and Roddick. He's bringing heat. He's tall. Was he 6'8"? The kid is just absolutely, but has a little more game than, say, your Riley Opelkas and whatnot that have big serves. He's not just all serve. He can back it up, and he's proved with some titles and so on. Jerry, I think, is fun to watch.
Isn't he?
I'll bring you another lefty who we probably left off the list that I think is done, that may never really been in contention, but certainly came on the scene, is my boy Denis Shapovalov. Came through with the funk and had the slap and the forehand and the big serve, and I think we all were hoping that he might make a quarter and a semi one day, and just unfortunately never materialized. He's a ripe old, probably 26, give or take by now, 27. Maybe, right? And unfortunately, I think we all see his window closing. And I hope that Shane doesn't do that. What's the other lefty that played Nishikori in the Atlanta Open? I want to say a year before last. Maybe in this past year. Nishioka, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Yep.
Right, that's fair. There's a player that I think that, that again, he reminds me a little bit of Jerry's. Much more flamboyant, has much more, much better.
Jerry's got swag, my guy. He's got swag.
But Nishioka is, as I like to say, he's anybody's bad day, because he just matches up so well to your game. And I want to say that, and I know he played your boy. He played Shelton. That's who he played. And that's who gave Shelton the early exit at the
that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Again, that said, I'm going to segue to maybe your other list. Look at some of your other rising Americans. I'll start with Ben, that you call it a sophomore slump. I would say, did they just have a good year? We speak of this like this is the top 5, top 10 player that had a bad year. Now, yes, he needs to regain form. I would say maybe that was just a one-off, and we need to start looking at these players as they are until they're able to prove that they are 2, 3, 4-year top 5 players with a shot legitimately at taking down and being in the last 2 weeks of a slam. The last 2 days of a 2-week slam.
I think the men's Americans tennis on the whole, like not just in 2025, but maybe over the last 25 years, that is a full conversation. I know we've talked about this, and there's something to be said about what has been going on in American tennis over the last, at this point, quarter century. And I think this year, with we've got 8 guys in the top 50, finish the year top 50. That is
phenomenal.
That is indicative of something. I think we really want to take some time to break down what that is indicative of, and it only makes sense to talk about that from a standpoint of where we've come from. Like, let's say the glory days of American tennis in the 90s. All the way up to today and what we've got. I want to put that to the side, though. Maybe the entire American men conversation. Let's put a pin in that one, because we've got something. We've got special cooking for the listeners out there in terms of American tennis. But yeah, we Fritz he's made some strides. He's into that top 5 space. Perfect timing, that you can't go if you don't go from 10 to 5, right? You don't see year 5 of that Nike contract. So
this is a big year for Taylor Fritz, period. This is a big year for my main man, Ben Shelton. This is a big year. If they want to fill in the space left in that vacuum, this is a great time to do it. There was a time, Alvin, back in the day when Australia was not Novak's tune-up tournament. It was the boneyard where any top seed who wasn't ready to go was going to get thrashed by some new hungry up-and-comer that you'd never heard of. It used to be Novak when he came through, and unfortunately, he just liked it so much he won it the next 7 out of the next 10 years. But I say it to say, how many Australians?
I think he's won 8. It's
8. I'm about to say I thought maybe one lost, but to my point. And I think one year he didn't even get to play. Wasn't it because of the whole COVID situation? Because he wouldn't get a vaccine.
Yeah.
But I say that to say, so you can even put that, whoever won that one is sending him a Christmas card saying, man, thanks so much, because I know if you'd been there, I may not have gotten this trophy, this check. So I say that to say, you'll be 10 years since, was it 08, 09? What was Novak's first slam winning Australia?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't
15
know
years ago at this point, but yeah.
So let's say it's 09. I'm pretty sure it was 09. Let's say that 15-year span, 10 of the 15 years, were Novak was the reason. If not the champ, he was the reason why somebody else was. So I say that now Australia used to be where a seed would go in and just get blistered. The conditions weren't ready. Coming off the offseason, they were just, and you had a kid that was coming through hungry. I mean, you hungry, ready to go, ready to do battle. They've been playing for 3 months and you just getting started. These guys were ready to go, fit, shape, grizzly beard, eyes locked in. They were ready to go. You're just coming out of the hospitality with your fresh shirt, and these guys are grinding, trying to get a shot. And you used to like that about Australia because Australia really showed you who some of the up-and-comers were. And then you kind of settle into the year. I'd like to see some of those players get back to the parity you spoke of earlier with Australia this year, and then we'll have a better, better feel and better, understanding of who will be making a run. As I said, we have the situation with Jannik to see what happens. Is the shoe going to drop on that one? We'll see. And if so, there's a huge window for some players. And then at that point, we'll see if some of the players materialize. You heard it right here. If they do, they have a shot to keep moving that ticker in that 5 years. And if they don't, they'll join an unfortunate long list of players that got to that level and just were not able to, as you say, open that door, didn't have that key.
Yep. I think that's a good place for us to kind of to off ramp here, but we're not gonna let you go without a quick trip to the coach's corner. I like to not I don't know, maybe one day I'll start preparing you for these, but I like to give them to you fresh and watch you work in real time. We talked earlier about actually in our open about the management of time on the tennis court. And I, way back in our relationship, you exposed me to the idea of counting the 1, 2, 3s in a rally. Can you explain that to the people, what that means, what that looks like, and then how, obviously how can our viewers, our current players, whether they be aspiring juniors or adult players, how can they incorporate time management, I'll say loosely, on the practice courts?
This will be explained in my book, but I'll give them a sneak peek. The cadence came from the music, a metronome. For those of us who've played music, those of us who even had a Casio keyboard back in the day, there was just a simple counter that gave you the time. 2-2, 4-4, 6-8, whatever the time was. And some of you musicians out there will appreciate how the time can vary. In most music pieces, the time varies. In most songs you read, the hook has a certain beat, and then of course, the main part of the song, the melody has a different beat. And of course, our remixes comes with a whole different beat. And we would, in tennis terms, we call that rhythm or play or the speed of play. Cadence is simply a way to manage the time given in a point. Whatever number you want to start with, it's a simple 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or a 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. It starts to become rhythmic. You're taking a very arrhythmic situation, a tennis rally, and trying to force it to have some semblance of order so your brain, your hands can get synced. And at that point in time, the one being, let's say, the opponent's ball coming to you, the two being the bounce, your hit being three, your ball bouncing to them being the and then it repeats. And you start getting into a groove, I will say. You find the rhythm of that rally. And at that point, you can actually start feeling the ball, having some consistency, able to understand and manage some of the things that are happening out there with less effort and less thought. The cadence to me, and to your point about the recreational player, let's say I'm a 2-5 player. I've got a team at my club now. One of the hardest things for them to do is to slow down. They're actually hitting the ball pretty well off of a feed, but in a rally, they're trying to the best ball they possibly can. They're not hitting that ball back in play to find rhythm. One of the biggest eye-openers for them is when I slow them down and make them count how consistent they are. And then they're like, it's easy. I'm like, yeah, you're making us too hard. You're making us way too hard. And then it's like they feel like they have to hit this amazing shot every time. And I'm like, that's not, good shots happen. They're not, you don't intend for them. And it just happens when the right moment hits, and you sometimes had less time to think about it. To your aspiring junior, I would say the cadence is huge. Big points. And I would call a big point the point after a bad mistake, and the point and any game point are, in my opinion, big points. I would even say after and closeout points and games. We've all had the unfortunate up 5-2, which seems much bigger than it is, right? It's just a break in most cases. And you get that break and you're gone. The ability to count, calm down, and to repeat what you've done up to this point is huge. And I think the counting takes away a little bit of that judgmental side. The brain that wants to tell you and wants to be your own critic, start getting negative, start getting tight. Cadence fills the void and lets your brain actually do its job. And you take that critical part of your brain and you let it help you as opposed to hurt you in the rally, in the match, and you just start to calm down and actually play the game. I would tell for any top high-level players, they've already understood this, but their ability to do that for longer, especially after a bad miss or a tough point, that is huge to me, because the quicker they can get back on track, you talk about the high level, it's all about errors and cutting down. You may make 8, maybe 10 in an entire 2-set match. Cutting down 12 to 8 is 50 ranking points. You know what I mean? As far as a level. So you're talking about, and in some cases, $100,000. You know what I mean? So you're looking at it's a big deal, those 4 less mistakes. And so the ability to stay on track longer and the ability to manage that time, and as you say, time management is huge. And the cadence can help each one of those players to do that if they would fall into that rhythm, fall into that cadence, so to speak, of their rally, and be able to manage what they're doing in front of them a little more cerebral, as opposed to trying to be mechanical and make it happen on the outside.
Fantastic. No notes from me on that one. I think this is a good place to leave the people. Once again, Tori, always a pleasure.
Alvin, my pleasure, brother. You once again, it's been a great. I don't get up early at 8:30 for many things these days with a smile on my face, and I've gotten up for this, and it feels like we've got not only a lot talked about, but I also feel like we really started to dig into some nice things. And I like your ability to you're like a cat. If I throw something at you, bam, what, gotcha, I got you on that one. And so you're very adept, and your agility, your moderator, and you're like Tirico, you know what I mean, Mike Tirico, and you literally can handle anything that's thrown at you, and do it with grace and style. And so my hat's off to you.
Well, I appreciate that. And those are the people that are still with us. I would say, like I said, do the thing. Like, subscribe, follow, whatever it is that your heart desires. I guess you can rate and review these things as well. I'm still learning. But yeah, I guess that's the end of today's knock around. Tori, I'll catch you in the next one.
And look forward to it, Albert.
Peace.